You're tuned in, tuned up, and ready to go. Welcome to Ria's Ham Shack, a weekly conversation about amateur radio, shortwave listening, and radio tech, hosted by Ria Jairam, N2RJ, and heard weekly on WRMI Legends Shortwave. And now, here's your host, Ria.
Well, you know, it wouldn't be Friday without Ria's Ham Shack, and here I am in the shack, talking to you. So how's it going? I'm Ria, call sign N2RJ. And I just came back from a wonderful week at the NAB Show in Vegas, and it was pretty good. Hung out with our fabulous hosts here at WRMI Legends. That's Ted Randall and Holly, and met up a good few radio amateurs, but also other people, you know, old friends, colleagues, and other people who are in the industry. So we will talk about, you know, some of the things at the NAB show, things that we saw related to amateur radio, but also radio in general. And, you know, because we do cover radio tech, right? And we'll also cover the news, answer your questions, and of course, you know, talk about good old-fashioned amateur radio. We are heard every week on WRMI Legends 5050 on your shortwave dial. And if you'd like to support the show, you can go to WRMIlegends.com, where you can see ways to support the show and keep us going. But first, let's talk about YouTube, because that's one of the things I do too as well. So we'll take a break and come right back. So in case you didn't know, Ria's Ham Shack is on YouTube, and you can go to youtube.com/@N2RJ. That's a YouTube channel where you can find a lot of great video content that's a companion to this radio show. You'll find the weekly Live with Ria streams. You'll find my general class licensing videos. You'll also find other interesting videos, news, tips, tricks, and how to get the most out of your amateur radio and other types of radio. I talk about GMRS, I talk about FRS, I talk about MERS, CB radio, whatever kind of radio. Even I talk about the FCC and the FAA and the kind of trouble they're getting into, okay, right here on Ria's Ham Shack. Yes, we are Ria's Ham Shack, youtube.com/@N2RJ, youtube.com/@N2RJ. So, you know, Vegas is famous for a lot of things, right? Vegas is famous for Elvis. Vegas is famous for gambling. It's famous for all of the wonderful shows. You know, you want to get married, you want to elope, you go to Vegas. But what Vegas also hosts now is the NAB Show, the National Association of Broadcasters. And so I've been going to the show for a while now. Of course, I've been in the industry for years, and it's been quite interesting. But the NAB is so much more than just broadcast, right? So you have a lot of broadcast engineering, you have a lot of different types of tech, and now you have a whole bunch of stuff about content creation, video, and audio, and all sorts of stuff. And it was really cool to see all the advancements in technology. This was the 100th year of the show, and it was really, well, the 100th show. And the NAB show, of course, the NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, is a trade association for broadcasters, whether it be radio or television, and of course the industry. And so I went there. Ted and Holly, of course, went there as well. They, you know, they do radio work. Ted, in particular, is a veteran of radio engineering for umpteen years. I mean, you know, he's forgotten more about radio than I know. But anyway, we went there and we, you know, I saw a lot of different things in technology space. I can tell you that radio isn't really dead, you know, broadcast radio in particular. There are a lot of different technologies with broadcast radio, especially today with connected cars. And one of the things I like to focus on is that one of the things we saw at the booth with connected cars. So there was a, I believe it was DBX or DTS. One of them were actually demonstrating a system whereby they send out information on FM of course, digital FM, HD radio. And then the cars picked that up, and then they would then respond with telematics, their built-in telematics system, back to the mothership. And then they were able to get all sorts of data, including where, in general, people were listening to various radio stations, what time and such. There was also a demonstration with electric vehicles where the FM radio signals could be used to manage electric vehicle charging. Okay, and as you know, I'm a big fan of electric vehicles, and I appreciate all new tech. So, radio is definitely it's not like it used to be, but radio certainly isn't dead. Radio has a lot of things going for it. Now, there was a ham radio gathering at the NAB Show, and essentially there was a reception for amateur radio operators. We had a conference room. It was sponsored by TEI Engineering, a really nice bunch of folks, and we were there, and I won an ARRL antenna book. I mean, I'm no longer with the ARRL, by the way, and one of the rules that we had was you can't take part in ARRL prize drawings. So now I'm no longer with the ARRL, so I can take part in that. But we had a wide variety of prizes. We had a lot of different different things to be given away, books, a lot of HTs, a lot of Baofangs, okay, but some Yesu as well too. And it was pretty nice. But it was more than just that. It was the friends. It was meeting people. It was getting to know people better. It was getting to make new friends and reunite with old ones. It's always good. One thing that was really puzzling was that there was no booth from the ARRL. So usually the ARRL section manager, John Bigley, I believe his call sign is N7UR, he usually staffs a booth for the ARRL, and he has been there on the show floor, and the booth is modest. It's not really like a big fancy trade show booth that you're accustomed to seeing, because I've been to some big trade shows. I went to CES this year. I've been to a whole bunch of different trade shows, like I go to AWS reInvent and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So this was more or less shocking for me, because you'd think for the 100th anniversary there would be a booth from the ARRL, but there wasn't. I don't think I blame John necessarily. I think the last time this got posted up on the internet, some people began to criticize. Hams like to sit back and give their unsolicited advice on things, and he probably took this to heart and decided not to do it, because it's a thankless job, really. But it was still nice to have the gathering anyway, because ham radio is kind of like primarily a social hobby in many respects. It's not just technical, and we would like to think it's technical, but there's so much of the social aspect of ham radio. But anyway, in that gathering we did meet up with some friends. We met up with of course Ted and Holly were there. We met up with a few others, radio amateurs, and people in the broadcast business as well too, who are just curious about ham radio but not necessarily licensed. And there are people who are interested in getting licensed. So it's always nice to meet up people there. So there were other people there too. I met up with Michelle Bradley, KU3N, who is she's been involved in low power FM. So you have what you call LPFM, which are basically small community stations, educational, non-commercial. They're not full power. They're designed to cover a small community. And she's been pretty much trying to get things organized with them and helping people get low power FM licenses. All the big manufacturers, I think, were there. I mean, there were some who were like the big transmitter manufacturers, Gates Air and Nortel, they were there too. And there was a bunch of TV stuff, and of course, so I worked in that industry. I saw like a lot of gear. Canon had like a whole big booth. Nikon had a booth, and we had others like Blackmagic Design was there too. And I use Blackmagic equipment to do my live streams, right? And a bunch of other things. The swag was a little light. They didn't have that much swag as they usually have before. The NAB store was bustling, and I kind of raided the store on the last day to get all sorts of merchandise for 40% off. Hey, you got to take advantage, right? But anyway, so I had a wonderful time with the NAB show. I did stay at the New York hotel in Las Vegas. I don't know if I'll stay there again. Do I want to be reminded of New York again? I don't know, but yeah, they were a little far from the convention center. I think I'll book early next time. Usually we stay down at the hotel nearby. But I like staying in downtown Vegas too, because downtown Vegas has a lot of interesting things. Like when I went for CES, I stayed at Plaza Hotel, and they have like nice bingo too. So yeah, but all in all, it was a wonderful gathering. I think I don't know when next I'll be in Vegas for another trade show. Probably soon. I go there from time to time. Like I said, I was at CES, and I'll probably end up going to some others. I did have to end up buying a big suitcase for things I brought back, and also went to the Coke store and Target. Pro tip: there is actually a credit union ATM inside Target on the strip. So instead of paying $9 to get cash from a Vegas ATM in a casino, you go to one of these small ATMs and do it. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's the story of me going to Vegas. And what do you think? Were you at the NAB show? I know a lot of people are. But if you were, you could tell me. Let's take a break and come right back. So one of the great things about having an HF radio is the ability to work DX. But you need to know where you can find this DX. And you can actually find all the latest news, tips, tricks, scuttlebutt, and on-the-scene reports at dx-world.net. That's dx-world.net. My friend Call and his fabulous crew of correspondents bring you all the latest DX news from around the world right into your ham shack. Okay, so check out dx-world.net, and they also supply the news here on Ria's Ham Shack. So if you want to get the source of the news, you go to dx-world.net. That's dx-world.net. So it's never pleasant to report about the inevitable in amateur radio, and unfortunately, I must report to you that we've lost a great one, Richard King, K5NA. He has passed away, but he hasn't just passed away. I mean, he had an accident with power lines. So I guess from his death, we can kind of learn a valuable lesson, which is keep away from power lines. And as antenna season ramps up, because we are in the springtime here in the northern hemisphere, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, if you're listening, hey, I'd love to hear from you. But you're heading into the autumn season, the fall. I never like to call it fall when it comes in relation to antenna towers, but we will be doing antenna work, and some of us do antenna work nearly all through the year. But you do have to understand that there must be a healthy respect for power lines. So Richard King, and Richard's wife was a good friend of mine, Susan, K5DU, and he was K5NA. And we really, I admired both of their commitment to amateur radio and DX, and they were very much steeped in it. So, rest in peace, my friend, and I hope your death was not in vain. So, like I said, keep a healthy respect for power lines Okay. You know, we did lose another radio amateur some years ago because of a tragic accident as well. Everybody remembered Paul Bittner, W0AIH, the Reverend Paul Bittner. I believe he was a Methodist minister or something. I'm not sure which denomination, but I knew he was a religious leader of some sort. So, yeah. So, please, my friends, and he fell off a tower. Please, my friends, let's all be careful. So in the DX world, from dx-world.net, who are a fine source of amateur radio news, I encourage you to check out dx-world.net. And they talk about T30UN. So for the past few days, T30UN is using 7 radios with 100 watts only due to one generator left and available for now. There is a chance to get a new one on Monday in South Tarawa. From North Tarawa to South Tarawa, it's a hell trip due to flooded roads and only at low tide. Maybe able to make the trip faster by boat, but only at high tide. And they have pictures of a beautiful beach, but it does seem that that beach is treacherous. And Dom3Z9DX says, take a look at the picture. There's about 1,500 meters to walk with a 100 kilogram generator. That's about 300 feet with I guess, I don't know. I metric, I knew metric, but it doesn't really mesh with me anymore. So 100 kilograms is what? Is like 50, 80 pounds? I don't know. From the edge of the reef to shack, if you miss high tide by boat, if they don't find a decent generator, they'll need to reduce operation to 3 to 4 radios. Last remaining generator works on the edge and burning brushes very quickly. Okay, brushes, motor. They have a lot of beautiful pictures, and they seem to be doing a lot of things there. So check out dx-world.net for news about that de-expedition. Then you have 5UA99WS from the African country of Niger, and Giorgio IU5HWS informs DX World that he will again be active from Niamey, Niger as 5UA99WS from approximately May 1st to June 15, 2023. His focus will be on FT8, but also run 40 to 10 meters SSB using the FT991A amplifier and multi-band dipole. Logbook of the World uploads managed by AK5SRF, and OQRS, Online QSL Request System, and QSL managed by EA5GL. More info to follow once he arrives in Niger. So, yeah, they seem to have a lot of interesting things. And, of course, you see all the different ways of life there in Africa. And Africa is one of the places I want to go to sometime. I don't know when, but hopefully I get there. Maybe start in South Africa and work my way up. And not surprisingly, here's a de-expedition that one of my friends is going to be on. So, TX5S Clipperton Island, the French National Frequency Agency, the ANFR, has reserved the call sign TX5S for use during the Clipperton Island de-expedition. The license will be valid for 15 days. We expect to operate maritime mobile, call sign to be determined, as the cost of expeditions to highly most wanted DXCC entities continues to increase. The importance of donations to support these projects has never been greater. The Clipperton Island project budget is $350,000. The ship's fee represents the largest expense, no surprise there, and must be paid in advance. We have set a fundraising target of $175,000. To date, we have raised $35,800. Support of the DX community is more important than ever, and we wish to thank our early individual donors, foundations, clubs, and corporate sponsors. So the team member update is going to have Nodir EY8MM, Alan EA3HSO, and Alan and I are good friends, by the way. Alan actually came to New York and we had lunch at Fogo de Chao, which is a Brazilian restaurant. Dave WD5COV, and in addition to Jackie ZL3CW, Dave K3EL, Steve W1SRD, Ricardo PY2PT, Gene K5GS, Heye DJ9RR, Lee C HA0NAR, Walt N6XG, Rob N7QT, Glenn KE4KY, Chris N6WM, another friend of mine. He's a Flex Radio enthusiast. Andreas N6NU, another Flex Radio enthusiast, and Arlis W7XU. Look for TX5S team members at the International DX Convention in Visalia. That's this weekend. And Dayton Hamvention and Ham Radio Friedrichshafen, and we hope to see you there. So yeah, they have a bunch of pictures on the website, dx-world.net. Lots of interesting DX news. I can't cover all of them, but if you want, you can actually look, and they have their weekend bulletin, their weekly bulletin on dx-world.net. You can get all of the latest news, and they have a lot of interesting things. So check them out, dx-world.net. So the Grid Tracker software, I'm sure many of you use Grid Tracker software. If not, you should be. And the Amateur Radio Software Award Committee, they have awarded Grid Tracker, led by Stephen Loomis, N0TTL, and the gridtracker.org team. So they've received the Amateur Radio Software Award, the 4th annual Amateur Radio Software Award. And this award basically is for software projects that enhance amateur radio and promote innovation, freedom, and openness in amateur radio software development. So this is great news. They do a lot of great stuff. I believe Grid Tracker deals with analyzing your log and putting them into grids and basically helping you work more grids. That's great. And of course, ARSA committee, they're looking forward to next year's award, and they welcome input and nominations. So if you have a favorite amateur radio software project, you can nominate them. And now we have this bit of news from the RSGB. Yes, the Radio Society of Great Britain. The new regional representatives have been co-opted and took up their roles after the RSGB AGM. Each was a direct representative in their region and has stepped up into the regional representative role. So Brian Jones, GW6ZYI, is now regional representative number 7. Andrew Jenner, G7KNA, is RR11. DR134, Bob Hambley, M0HAF, is RR13. So we welcome them to their new roles. Yes, and those of you listening in Great Britain, and I hope to hear more from you and more news. I'm a member of the RSGB as well. I might actually be heading over to the UK in June sometime, probably after Friedrichshafen. Those of you heading to Dayton Hamvention, I'll also be at Dayton Hamvention, the National Voice of America Museum of Broadcasting, in association with the Westchester Amateur Radio Association. They will have expanded hours during the 2023 Dayton Hamvention. They will be open Thursday, May 18th from 1 to 9 p.m., Friday, May 19th from 1 to 9 p.m., Saturday, May 20th from 12 to 9 p.m., and Sunday, May 21st from 12 to 5 p.m. Admission is $10 at the door, and the Westchester Amateur Radio Association WC8VOA will be on the air. And, of course, you can drive there from Dayton Hamvention, down I-75 or Route 42 from Xenia. And you can use the Crosley Boulevard address on your GPS. So they have a number of new exhibits, including amateur radio and shortwave equipment, and a new ham shack with a state-of-the-art equipment from Yaesu, ICOM, and Elecraft. And of course, docents and operators will be available to enhance visits to the museum. So you can go to voamuseum.org or wc8voa.org. And you can go there and experience it. So I don't know, it might be on my list. Who knows? But it seems pretty good. So go and check it out, especially if you love radio broadcasting. If you love shortwave radio, I love shortwave radio, which is why I broadcast on shortwave radio. And the special call sign Gulf Bravo 23C is confirmed as the coronation for King Charles. He will have King Charles III, his special event call sign. We're delighted that Ofcom has determined that the call sign GB23C can be used for the RSGB's Coronation SSES special event station. Cray Valley Radio Society, members led by Bob, M0MCV, and Dave, G4BUO, are organizing the flagship amateur radio station, which will use this call sign from 3rd to 8th May. The special event station will be in the grounds of the old Royal Navy College along Riverside and Greenwich. From 10 May until the end of June, the call sign will be available for individuals and clubs to use until the end of June 2023. Further details will be announced shortly. And as an aside for this, I do have the ability to use the call sign, a special call sign for the King Charles coronation, and I will be actually in the UK operating, so I'm going to try to operate and possibly work some of you, and you'll get a special call sign, so a special QSL card. So please do look out for me. And I had to actually apply for a notice of variation. So my call sign will be Mike Romeo 0 Romeo Alpha Juliet. That's Mike Romeo 0 Romeo Alpha Juliet. And that will be used with my license. I most likely will be operating from near to Manchester in the UK. So look out for me. So once again, a good reminder that we live in a global society. And this one is from the National. Sultan Al-Nayadi tells pupils that he enjoys floating like Superman in space. Emirati astronaut Sultan Al-Nayadi spoke to pupils during the first amateur radio session from the ISS on Tuesday. Asked what he loved about living on the ISS, Dr. Al-Nayadi said he enjoyed floating in space like Superman from one module to another. The Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center arranged a 10-minute radio session in collaboration with the Emirates Amateur Radio Society and the Emirates Literature Foundation, and as the ISS passed over the region, news agency WAM reported. The event, held at UAE Space Center, is the first of 10 radio sessions in a series titled A Call with Space. 25 pupils from various schools in the Emirates took part and asked questions about the launch, what inspired Dr. Al-Nayadi, 41, to become an astronaut, and his memorable experiences. They were also interested in the scientific experiments being conducted, visible climate changes, and space-related activities. Dr. Al-Nayadi gave a glimpse of life aboard the orbiting space lab and also spoke about how astronauts communicate, maintain their psychological health, and stay fit. He captivated the young audience by providing valuable insights and encouraged them to explore the realms of space further. Sharing the message of importance in protecting our planet, Dr. Al-Nayadi said he was able to better understand how precious and beautiful our planet is from his vantage point on the ISS. All right, so there's a lot of stuff here. And Sultan Al-Nayadi, a UAE astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, which includes Dubai, and very nice. You can see here a lot of images here as well too. So very nice to have that, space previously was limited to only a few countries. Now we're seeing everybody getting in on the act. And also, not so much amateur radio, but space news. This week, of course, we saw the test of SpaceX Starship while it exploded in midair. I believe they did that intentionally. It signals a new era in space is coming. So who knows? There might be amateur radio involved in that. All right. Well, that is the news, my friends. And I hope you enjoyed. We play the news every week on Ria's Ham Shack right here on WRMI Legends. But as of now, we're going to take a break and we'll come right back with your very favorite segment. Yes, that is the Q&A, where we take your questions and give you the answers you may or may not want to hear right here on Ria's Ham Shack. I am Ria, N2RJ, and we will be right back. All the ways to listen to Ria's Ham Shack, let me count the ways. The first and the best way is, of course, on WRMI Legends 5050 on your shortwave dial, and other frequencies as appropriate. You can also listen on the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can listen on WRMILegends.com, where we have it on the live stream. You can catch it on the Ria Ham Shack YouTube channel. Just look for youtube.com/@N2RJ. I publish a show, and it's always a few days after it airs on WRMI Legends. And if you want to get the show first, you go on WRMI Legends 5050 shortwave or on WRMIlegends.com. Of course, you can also go on WRMIlegends.com to find out ways to support the show and support the station and to keep the tubes glowing and keep the fabulous shortwave programming coming. Now back to Ria's Ham Shack. So one of the things I absolutely love about this show and the 100,000 watt microphone is that I get to answer your questions, okay? I get to spread the knowledge because I really haven't been in amateur radio all that long. I've only been in it 25 years, whereas most other people seem to be in it for like 50 and 60 years, when Hiram Percy Maxim walked the earth. But, I think that I still have a lot to share. And of course, I was being sarcastic. But anyway, yeah, so I will, as a reminder, I will be at Dayton Hamvention, which is going to be in May, and also be at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen in Germany, which is at the end of June. And unfortunately, it's the same weekend as ARRL Field Day, so I'm going to miss out on that. Well, maybe I might try to remote into my home station and work a few stations, but I'm not going to be in the field, unfortunately. One local company here, Tri-County Radio Association, is looking for operators. Unfortunately, I can't be with them because, obviously I'll be in Germany. So, right. So one person here asks, of course, you can send your questions to Ria at n2rj.com, Romeo India Alpha at n2rj.com. So this person says that how, he passed the test by just memorizing the questions and answers. Is this okay? Well, of course it's okay because you got a license, right? Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with each path to get into ham radio. I do not necessarily subscribe to the whole license to learn argument. I do think that there is some validity in learning the material and getting in, with some knowledge under your belt. With that said, if you're already there, then it's no big deal. I mean, you have plenty of resources to learn from. I would recommend picking up a few books. One of them is the ARRL Handbook. You can get them from various number of places. Amazon has them. You can order from my friend at Chat Radio in Chattanooga, Tennessee, chatradio.com. You can buy them from Hamfest. Now, what I've been doing, too, is I've been buying a lot of the older handbooks, and the older handbooks tend to have more interesting projects, I think, in some cases, meaning that they have dangerous things using tubes and using all sorts of things, and lots of construction projects, not for the faint-hearted. So, you build something from that. Yeah, you got to be careful because you might be dealing with, as Jeff Lawrence would say, thousands of volts. Okay. Yeah, you're dealing with thousands of volts. It's a reference to one of the WRMI promos, where he goes miles of wire, thousands of volts. So, yeah. So, anyway, as I was saying, the handbooks are good. Antenna book is good. There are a number of different other books. The RSGB publishes some really nice books. And if you can get a copy of ON4UN's low band DXing, you could probably get some good tips on that, especially about low band operating. And low bands are fun because they present a unique propagation challenge that you don't necessarily have with the higher bands. So, check them out. Other thing to do is get involved with a local club. I mean, clubs get a bad rap, and some clubs do deserve the bad rap. I will not pull punches on this one. Some of them are unfriendly to newcomers, and we absolutely don't need that in this hobby because we need the newcomers. We need the new blood. Okay, we need new blood. And if you have a club, it is in your best interest to be friendly to people who come in, who are new, who are willing to learn. Right? Get them on the air, help them get on the air, and help them get the most out of ham radio. That's one. The other thing is put them onto YouTube. Let them watch some videos. I produce some good videos on a lot of beginner topics. I do live streams every Sunday night, 9:30. Well, not every Sunday night, but most Sunday nights, 9:30 Eastern U.S. time. and you can join the fun. I've also I do various videos on different topics about news happenings. I even tell people how to do radio communications without an amateur radio license. So that is one thing to do. And maybe, of course, field day. So if you just got licensed, look for a local field day operation. Maybe the club will let you get on and make some contacts. They usually have a get on the air station that gives you some extra points, you know. So that is that's really interesting. So this person says, what is your experience? Marco Martin says, experience with this radio. This is just hype. At least it has an FCC ID. So, and then he pointed to some Quancheng radio that's been all the rage on Quancheng UVK5 on AliExpress. So let me tell you the deal, and it's $25. Let me tell you the deal with some of these radios, okay? And I'm not going to be, I'm going to be very blunt. A lot of these radios come from China in particular, right? They're very cheap in terms of like the price you pay, in terms of the spectral purity, in terms of how clean they are, in terms of whether the signal stays in the band. They're a hit or miss. You might find some good ones. And there's the Baofeng GT5R, which I always recommend because they made a special effort with that radio to be FCC compliant. And you want to do that because, honestly, if you aren't FCC compliant, your signals are spewing out the band. First of all, you're wasting power, right? You're wasting energy, you're wasting battery. And second of all, you might as well not transmit a license at all because your transmission is illegal. That doesn't mean all these cheap radios are bad. It's just that you need to find out which ones are good. And a good way to do it, the Baofeng GT5R. There's also like the ARRL also tests radios at Hamfest. So you could bring your Chinese radio to the Hamfest and they can test. I could tell you pretty much guarantee that a lot of these radios either barely pass or don't pass at all. If you want more or less a guarantee, I really would recommend a good radio from one of the major brands. You know, I like ICOM, Yaesu, Kenwood, and Alinco, which is pretty much all of them. And my daily radios now are a Yaesu FT70D and my ICOM 705. So those are two radios that I carry around with me. And the ICOM does VHF, UHF, D-Star, and the Yaesu does FM and System Fusion, C4. Of course, I do have my Kenwood THD74, but I'm kind of like giving that a rest. I don't want it to get broken because it's kind of a rare radio now. They've stopped producing it for some reason. So it's always nice to have. But yeah, I love those radios. And in particular, Yaesu makes a good radio that is rugged, that could fall. I might have mentioned this before. You can buy them from good radio shops like R&L and also Main Trading Company. And both of these are fine sponsors of WRMI Legends. So we'd really appreciate their, if you go check them out, right? And of course, you can tell them Maria from WRMI Legends sent you because they would love to know that you heard them on shortwave. Okay, so one of the most interesting things asked by people these days is, I just got, and you would never believe it, I just got an end-fed half-wave antenna. Okay, so an end-fed half-wave antenna seems to be popular among newbies today and old hams alike. And like every antenna, it is a compromise. And they ask, can I put it horizontal? And will it affect, will it be good if it's horizontal? So my answer to this is, buddy, if you're going to put an end-fed half-wave horizontal, why aren't you looking at a dipole, even an off-center fed dipole? Because one of the reasons is that if you have a dipole, like a full dipole, you will have less common mode current, right, on the feed lines. So you're not going to have as much RF feeding back into the shack along the coax, and common mode current will definitely affect, it'll cause hot microphone syndrome where your microphone gets you an RF bite, or it might give you, interference going back your shack. You don't want that. You could put a choke, and the choke will work, but it might not work well. That said, people, if you have no choice, right? I can't see a situation where you don't have a choice, but if you have no choice, maybe, yes, I get it. You live in an HOA and you have these aesthetics to worry about, right? And for those of you outside the United States, HOA, Homeowners Association, essentially is like a community association of people who have, covenant codes and restrictions on their homes. They're not allowed to do certain things. So what happens is that and I know especially in the UK, you have basically a lot of people complain about your antennas to the local council, and then you're not able to put it up. That said, you have that situation where you have nothing else. It will work. It will still work, but I really recommend a dipole. The radiation pattern on this thing is going to be all sorts of off, and if you get it really high up, it's going to be nice and round. If you get it, let's say, like lower down, it's going to get all sorts of skewed, and it's not going to be so good. So I really recommend using a dipole. Multiband, I tend to stay away from the multiband ones unless you have aesthetic concerns. The multiband one tends to produce all sorts of lobes and nulls inside of it, and you might be disadvantaged in some directions, some unexpectedly. But there is an article I could tell you, and you could go to VU2NSB.com/antenna/wire-antennas/EF-HW-antenna, or you could look for VU2NSB multiband end-fed half-wave EFW and EF-HW antenna, and you will be able to see what a nice article written about it. So check it out. I mean, the end-fed is not a bad antenna, but it's not really a good antenna. You might want to try a counterpoise, like a 12 or 13 foot counterpoise, and you will be able to make contacts, okay? I mean, there's no denying you'll be able to make contacts, but you know what? I could stick my finger in the antenna socket and make contacts. So that really doesn't mean anything. It really, really doesn't mean anything. Right. And let's see here. The next question is, which radio is good all-band radio that costs less than 1K? Well, there are several of them. I mean, no-brainer. The ICOM 7300 is probably the best value in radio. And FT100D is another good one. But, there's a number of different of them. And today there are many one. And you can actually try use radio as well, too. But $1,500, I think, is a more realistic one, especially with the inflation that we have. Right. Let's see here. New ham needs good source for RG58 coax for an antenna connector. Well, first of all, RG58 is not really that good for home antennas, and I really would recommend that you use at least RG213, and you can get that from your favorite radio stores like R&L Electronics and Main Trading Company. And of course, both of those are sponsors of WRMI Legends, and you can tell them that Ria from WRMI Legends sent you. But the 213 is lower loss, and there is, of course, the coax calculator that I always mention on the show from CO8TW. So CO8TW, I want to make sure I get this right. CO8TW coax calculator. Let's see here. Yeah, right. QSL.net/CO8TW, and he has a coax calculator, coax loss calculator there. And this is from Juan Carlos. He lives in Cuba, Santiago de Cuba, about 963 kilometers southeast from Havana and in Cuba. So very nice. And you check it out, and you will see a lot of loss calculators for coax. So this one was asked, I'm sure it was tongue-in-cheek, this was by Bill Holt, what temporary effect on propagation do you think an exploding starship has? Well, you want to know something? Nothing on the ionosphere, but it may have some effects similar to meteor scatter, depending on how high it was. If it burned through the atmosphere and it ionizes some part of the atmosphere, it could have some effect. But I don't think it really went up that high. I think it didn't go up high enough. However, hams use all sorts of things to reflect radio waves. One of them we use is airplane scatter, where we point our antennas up at nearby aircraft, and those aircraft will reflect signals down back to Earth that went up, and you can use that for propagation. Similarly, all the little metal shards coming from the spacecraft that didn't make their way into space, actually, you could reflect radio waves on them briefly. And you know, some interesting mode to use for this would probably be MSK 144, where you keep sending the signal over and over and it catches on one of the trails. And this is used actually for meteor scatter, right? And in the old days, they actually used analog tape, but they're not going to be able to do anything like that. So Travis here asks, I need to replace the tubes in my Dentron Clipperton L. That's an old amplifier. What's the best way to make sure all voltage is gone so I don't electrocute myself? Well, the best way is to ask somebody who's experienced in this, but the second best way, of course, is you get a little grounding probe, and we call it a chicken stick. So what you do is you turn off the amplifier, unplug the amplifier, watch the voltage meter, make sure it goes down, and then you open it up. You have a grounding probe, which essentially is a probe with a little bleeder resistor in it, and then you clip one end to the ground, and then you clip the other end to the capacitor, each of the terminals of the capacitor, and leave it on for like about 10 seconds, and this way you bleed off all the voltage, okay? And you can also use gloves when you're playing with these high voltage amplifiers. This way you're not actually touching anything, so it's good. It's really good. And the safety hazards, it's not only voltage. I mean, some of these tubes are glass, and some of these tubes kind of like could shatter in your hand, so, but the shorting stick is definitely the best way to go. You could probably get it. We used to have this issue when we were servicing TVs back in the day. A number of us actually grew up servicing TVs. I used to actually know how to fix old TVs with CRTs. And Bill Pasternak, WA6ITF, he was near. There was a TV shop in Brooklyn he used to hang around. And funnily enough, he thought he would get into ham radio to talk to girls. But I don't know what made him think that would happen. Anyway, it was just a joke, but we miss Bill as well too. But yeah, so short the voltage out with a shorting probe and get it out, and then you'll be able to do that safely. All right, so this next question is about power supplies. Charles is asking, do you have one power supply for each radio, or do you have multiple radios wired to a single power supply and only run one radio at a time? So this is an interesting question. And to this I say, if you have a big enough power supply, like I have a 50 amp Astron, and if you have a big enough power supply, you can run multiple radios. It's not uncommon to run multiple radios. If you have a power supply that is only sized for one radio, for example, I say for an HF radio, you need at least a 25 amp power supply, if not a 30 amp. And for a VHF radio, you need at least a 10 to 15 amp power supply, depending on the VHF, UHF radio, how much power out. So once you meet those specs, you're able to run one radio. If you double it, you can run more than one radio. But, if you're guaranteed not to use both radios at the same time, well, you can actually just use one power supply and keep one turned off while the other's turned on. And remember that even when receiving, a radio still consumes power. So you want to make sure that you completely switch off the radio. One thing you can do is you can get one of those panel boards that has like a bunch of Anderson power pole on them, and then you can use that to basically unplug the radios you're not using. It might get a little cumbersome. You unplug, or you have a switch. Some of them have a switch. You could switch them completely off. This way you're assured you're not going to be running two radios at the same time. I mean, the worst that could happen is that the power supply might shut itself down to protect itself. And that really is no big deal, because then you just turn it back on, but it is annoying. In extreme cases, you'll probably blow the fuse or burn the power supply up, in which case, well, tough luck. You need to fix it. But you avoid this by doing some smart planning. I would say power supplies, especially switching power supplies, are probably cheap enough that you get one dedicated to each radio. And one interesting thing I learned, getting into the licensing, is that initially, so I did the UK licensing, and their whole their thing was that when you power your radio, you should have a master switch to turn off everything. And the way you do that is you could run one of these power strips, and one of these power strips, well, you plug in all your ham equipment to it, and when you're done, you could switch it completely off. So that's another tip and trick for you today. But for the most part, you want to use RG58 in vehicles. You really don't want to use it in your home station, and that's an important thing. If you can get away from it, that's good. I mean, on HF it might not be so bad, but the other thing is that it's probably going to be, it's not going to handle power. So if you use an amplifier, it's out right off the bat. So you're much better using RG213 or better. And believe me, there is better. All right, so this next question concerns concerning wire size for a dipole. Larger the gauge of wire, broader the bandwidth. And this is from KG5BWB. There are a million opinions on this, but here's the scoop. For the insignificant increase from one gauge to another, meaning that, instead of using 14 gauge, you use 12 gauge, there really isn't going to be much. There really isn't going to be much of a difference. Where you will get a difference is if you do something like a cage dipole. So a cage dipole essentially is where you have multiple wires kind of like, arranged loosely in like a cylindrical pattern, but you have them in parallel, and this way you have much broader bandwidth. And this is kind of common on the lower bands like 80 meters, because on 80 meters, let's face it, you have a whole big swath of spectrum from 3500 to 4 megahertz, 3.5 to 4 megahertz, at least in the Americas. And outside of the Americas, you have 3.5 to 3.8 megahertz. And in some countries, they chop it up even further. But with that kind of bandwidth, you can actually talk voice from 3.6 to 4.0 megahertz in the US, and in other countries, you have 3.5 to 3.8 megahertz. So you have a lot of bandwidth to talk phone, and this is going to be problematic if you just have like a simple wire. So what there is a cage dipole, and it's exactly what it is. It's essentially where you have the increase in bandwidth because you have multiple wires essentially in like a cage, right? So they have like cylindrical, insulators on each end, and you put 4 wires. You put 2 on, essentially evenly spaced, right? And you have a very wide bandwidth, and you have SWR of about 2 to 1 across the band. So it's very popular. But I find that it's kind of like fallen out of favor for DX, because DX you don't really need a whole bunch of a whole bunch of frequencies for DX in contests, right? And you only have it for like if you decide to rag chew. Now the ARRL actually on W1AW has a 75-80 meter cage antenna, and it's suspended on 3 of the towers, and it provides a nice way to work across the band. Yeah, and they will be using it for bulletins and all sorts of stuff. So it's especially important for them because the ARRL W1AW uses solid state amplifiers. I use a solid state amplifier, and solid state amplifiers are not very tolerant of high SWR, and you must have an antenna that's pretty much evenly matched. You can have an external tuner, but even tuners can only tolerate a small variance in SWR, and then that power is wasted, and that goes to heat up the tuner. So generally you want to have that, and the cage dipole is it. Now this one is about operating overseas, because yes, I'm going to Germany and the UK, and this one's from Larry. Says, I have a daughter living in Switzerland. I want to visit and broadcast from there. Well, you're not broadcasting, you're transmitting, you're operating ham radio from there. Does anyone have experience with the CEPT licensing process? So for the good news is that it's mostly automatic. What you do is you print out a copy of the CEPT agreement, and you bring it with you, and you bring it with you a printed copy of your license, and then you apply the prefix stroke your call sign. So in my case, if I were to use CEPT and I go to Germany, I would be Delta Lima stroke November 2 Romeo Juliet. So Delta Lima stroke November 2 Romeo Juliet, and this way I'll be operating. If I were to go to the UK, and I'll explain more in a moment, if I were using CEPT, I would go Mike stroke N2 RJ. Now, I do have a UK license, so I can actually operate there with my UK call sign. Like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the special event, I hope you're paying attention. Yeah, I can operate Mike 0 Romeo Alpha Juliet. And the British call signs have a special little thing where if you go to different parts of the UK and also the Channel Islands, so the United Kingdom is England, Wales, Scotland, and of course Northern Ireland. And then you have the Channel Islands of Jersey and Guernsey, and I forgot if there's any others, but yeah, you can operate there. So CEPT is the agreement, and CEPT actually recognizes licenses from the US as well. Even though we are not officially part, of the signatories, but they do recognize us and we recognize them. So we we're non-European countries, but we recognize the European CEPT technical recommendation. This way people from both sides of the pond can operate. So I do plan to operate, like I said, for the King's coronation, and hopefully somebody there will help me get on the air. Who knows? It's going to be pretty interesting. But you must have a general or higher license, by the way. You cannot operate using a technician. And the generals do not get access to HF, believe it or not, in some countries. It's pretty much, some countries observe part of the agreement, some observe another part, and the UK in particular does not allow you to have operate with a so-called novice license. So bear that in mind. They treat your general like a novice license, believe it or not. I can't believe that either. You work so hard to get general and they treat it like a novice license. That's kind of blasphemy, but it is what it is. That's one more reason to get extra. Or if you had an advanced license, by the way, that'll work too. Okay, advanced is one of the license classes that will allow you to get full privileges, and I have an extra, so I have been that. You could also ask the ARRL. They will be able to tell you, and the ARRL can help you with all sorts of operation outside the US, like for example the IARP. That one is for the Americas, particularly South America. You can actually operate in different countries in South America with that, and the Caribbean. Except that their process, in some Caribbean countries, is that you might have to notify them that you're going to operate there. Otherwise, they might just, you'll be operating illegally. So some of them you just show up. Some of them you have to notify them in advance, and then they will be able to tell you what you're, if you're eligible to operate. Well, my friends, we got to wrap it, tie the ribbons on it here. And I am Ria N2RJ. It's been very nice chatting with you this week on Ham Radio. If you'd like to QSL the show, you can email ria@n2rj.com, or you could send a mail to P.O. Box, send your reception order to P.O. Box 73, Sussex. That's Sierra Uniform Sierra Sierra Echo X-Ray. The state is New Jersey, and the zip code is 07461. right? United States of America. Peace in 73.